Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young, licensed clinical social worker. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. This is bonus episode 43, and I'm just going to kind of wing it off the cuff. What I want to talk to you today is how we negotiate what I call competing needs in relationships. And that's when one person has one need and it is in conflict with the other person's need. So I'll give you some more context. I, within the last couple months, made a new friend. We've talked about relationships. And so this is someone who doesn't live locally, so we use the app Marco Polo to communicate. And early on in the relationship, something happened. We had a little bit of a bump and had a misunderstanding. This person gave me some feedback that felt a little intrusive and uncomfortable. And I really kind of hesitated. Do I want to say something? It's a new relationship. But I'm really practicing being honest and present in my relationships. And so I kind of thought, I really want to have relationships that I can show up and tell the truth and see if the relationship can tolerate that. And so I communicated that to this person, and we were able to navigate through this bump really beautifully. And it was kind of esteeming and rewarding. So we had this pattern of communication that was pretty frequent, and I really enjoyed the depth of processing that we had, the things that we were talking about. And what happened is this person has a lot of other things that are going on in their life right now, and they've been really transparent about what's going on. And what I also loved is, this is another highly sensitive person, and when they've kind of needed to withdraw, they've really been kind enough to say, hey, I'm going to be retreating for a little bit, so you may not be hearing me. Now, we don't have to do that when we're in relationships, but when we do, it creates so much safety and peace, because then I know, hey, if I don't hear from this person for a couple of days, I know that they're just taking a break. They need some time and space. While I have a really strong need for connection, I never, ever, ever want anybody to have to show up in a way that doesn't work for them. We'll work it through in the relationship. So what's happened recently is our communication frequency is, gotten a little bit further apart. And for a while, I was trusting that I could continue to show up the way I had been. And then we had a little bit of dialogue where this person was saying that they're not able to show up in the way that they had been. And for maybe me to look and see if, they had been able to get to the polos that I was sending so that they wouldn't get too backlogged. And what happened is, that I have these attachment wounds around being too much, being too needy. It really gave us an opportunity to talk about this. And as if you've listened to episode, I think it was 25 with Laura Carr, where we didn't talk for 20 years. The way that I've learned to navigate relationships is by making rules, and I don't want to do that anymore. I'm really trying to show up and be very present, but also honor what my needs are. And so what this brought up for me was this feeling of being too much, that I want to be connecting the same way I was, and this person is needing more space right now because of the things that are going on in their life. It has nothing to do with me. But it brought up that feeling of I need to start monitoring myself. I need to see if they've seen my polos. I need to figure out, can I send a polo today, or do I need to see if they've watched my polo? It was bringing a lot of self-consciousness about how frequently I was showing up to the relationship, and triggering that wounding for me just felt really uncomfortable. And so what I talked about was wanting to take a little bit of a step back for right now. And that for me was a form of self-care, that if that narrative of me being too much is coming up and we have competing needs, I have a need to connect more frequently than this other person does. Not a bad thing. We just are needing different things right now. And it was bringing up this feeling of too much for me, that I've got to monitor, and I don't want to do that. That it just pulls up too much wounding. And so I was able to say, I'm not coming from a place of punishment or judgment or reactivity. I think what I need to do for self-care is to just take a little bit of a step back. And when you're able to show up again the way that we were, we'll pick it back up again. So I sent this polo off yesterday, and then I got a polo back today. And it's really interesting because I found myself bracing. Every time we do this, it's more vulnerability. We're saying, I don't know how to do this. This is what's coming up for me. I found myself bracing, and what I found was this person was incredibly reflective, heard what I said, didn't take it the wrong way. And what I said in the polo is, what I would really like is, can you get back to me and let me know how you're hearing this? Because I feel really clear about where I'm coming from, but I want to feel assured that you're hearing this with the spirit that I'm saying it. So when this person poloed me back today, I was bracing. And then when I felt like I was really being seen and heard, I let myself cry, because really what was underneath that bracing is, am I going to be seen? Am I going to be understood? Is this person going to know where I'm coming from? Or are they going to come at me with anger or judgment, or feeding into my narrative of, you want me to show up for you and you're asking too much and I can't do that and that's not realistic. That's from my past. And as we walk through new experiences where we are vulnerable and we allow ourselves to have intimacy in the relationship, that's going to be natural for it to come up, which is why I'm sharing my process with you, because this is stuff that we all go through. This is really normal. So this person responded to me, and it was really nice because this person also said that they were showing up much more frequently than they do for their relationships. And they realized that that's not sustainable over the long run. And they can do that with their partner, they can do that with their child. But as far as how they show up in relationships, that this was unusual, and that upon some reflection, it's just really not sustainable. I get that. I had a listener reach out to me, and it happened to be on a day that I had time off, and we spent a pretty fair amount of time poloing back and forth because the timing was just right. And what I found over time is that's not sustainable. So again, this is how we practice in relationships. Relationships are kind of living things. And when we can tell the truth about what's going on, and we can allow room for relationships to grow and to change, and for our needs to grow and change, we can make relationships work. So what I came back with was, I acknowledged this person for really helping me to feel seen and heard and valued and honored. That really meant a lot to me. And knowing that we'll just kind of figure it out from here, and if it works to reconnect. And I sent a follow-up to the first polo saying, and I want to let you know how much I really enjoy connecting with you. I appreciate our conversations, the vulnerability, the honesty that we have. And I feel sad at not having that, but I want to let you know how much I appreciate you and our conversations. So it just feels like it's a whole new way to do relationships. And then after I sent the polo, I said, I'm going to send you a text. So I sent a text just saying, I really want to do a bonus episode about this. I'm not going to say who you are, but I really want to talk about this process. So please give me the heads up, or let me know what your concerns are, because I often have this thing like, people are not going to want to be in relationships with me because I may talk about it on the podcast. What I would really like to believe is, I'm very clear about my intention in sharing, is that I want to model the things that we go through that I don't see a lot of people talking about. And it brings up stuff for us. It's really normal. It's average, especially if we're risking and trying to have more intimacy and joy and closeness in our lives. These are the things that we're going to come up against, and we can totally work through them. So what I would ask you is, are there relationships where you're getting your needs met or you're not getting your needs met? Are you having competing needs? For HSPs, what that can often look like is one person, usually the non-HSP, wants to be going out and doing things more than the HSP does. And so what are ways that we can talk about that, bring attention to it, and work things through? My husband's going to do a recording with me as soon as we can make some time. And that's one of the things that comes up in our relationship. He loves going out and doing things, and I spend a lot of my energy outgoing during the week. So on the weekends, I'm really happy to cocoon and stay at home, and he really wants to go out. So we're going to talk about how we navigate that in our relationship. We do it imperfectly, but to take a look at your relationships, and are there things that you're needing to communicate about? Can the relationship tolerate the communication? But this is how we test it out. And what I would really encourage you to do is, in your newer relationships, when we start risking and having these more open patterns of communication with new friendships, it kind of gives us a chance to test the waters out. And I would rather find out now, sooner than later, that this person doesn't have the capacity to process or to understand or to reflect at the level that I do, Let's find that out right away so that I can move on and invest my energy into relationships where somebody's going to be able to meet me at the level that I show up with. I don't mean that in any kind of a harsh way, but let's flesh it out now. It's a little bit more complicated when you've got long-standing relationships and you've shown up in a certain way and now you want to do it differently. So that's kind of a whole other topic. If you're wanting more intimacy, more closeness, more authenticity and connection and joy in your relationships, these are the ways that we do it. And it means having to be uncomfortable. And it does mean the bracing and kind of wondering if people are going to come back at us and validate our old narratives about what we think is wrong with us. And it also creates the opportunity to have new levels of connection and intimacy. And really what's the most important is, like in this situation, I'm really honoring me and how I show up in the world, and that I don't want to be in relationships where I'm just waiting for the other person and I'm wondering constantly, am I too much? Is this too much? That feeds into that old narrative. And really, I have so much to offer, and I want to be in relationships where that can be mirrored back to me, where there's reciprocity. There's definitely room for competing needs. And so as I've talked about in this relationship, we're still continuing our relationship. We're figuring out how to navigate it. And I get to decide, where do I want to put my energy? What is it that I want to get from relationships? And so I get to choose who I want to, quote, play with in my relationships. I hope you found this helpful. I hope you're having a blessed day. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's our superpower.